usual. Go on. Alright, so got Zarina. We had a great conversation before.
The rational female.
I was thinking about that name. You're kind of making other females sound irrational by that, but anyway, but...
No, it's something to aspire to. Every female should be a rational female.
Okay, interesting. I think I don't really want. Maybe it's part of the discussion that I was thinking of discussing, but I think women are different and have a speciality in their emotion, which is a different kind of subconscious rationality, I think. But it'd be an interesting discussion. So, so what I want to talk about is: do traditional gender roles maintain relationships? And I think there's a big comeback in traditional roles. There's trad wives popping all over YouTube. Do check it out. Trad is short for traditional, and I think there's a comeback because there's a massive problem in Western relationships. Like, you can give lots of statistics, but half of marriages break down. That's an old statistic, but a new one that's becoming realized is that 18 to 30-year-olds all over the West, 50% of them had no sex. This is the time when they've got a higher sex drive. So something's desperately messed up, and people are going, well, the new stuff isn't working. Maybe it's the old stuff that's working. And actually, without getting off, I want to get your feedback, but that's actually statistically true. The more orthodox religious you are, that's statistically proven to show that your family structure is going to be maintained, you're going to have more children and things like that. So just an initial kind of introduction. Oh, I should have introduced myself. So you're
rational female. That's my YouTube channel.
But besides that, you're the anti-feminist. Right?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's kind of like your main thing. And I am the Muslim who does happiness classes that anybody can benefit from, but my ideas stem from Islam. But even Islamic ideas are very common between lots of religions anyway. And so those traditional values are usually religious values. So if you're talking about Orthodox Jews and Orthodox Muslims and Orthodox Christians, they're the ones who have the most children, and because they're the most stable families. So because I want to teach this idea of Islamic values, how that can help relationships, I'm going to start with a bit of a verse which says, when we're talking about men and women, they are a garment for you and you are a garment for them. And that word garment, the Quran, this is from the Quran, they use a lot of, the Quran uses a lot of metaphorical, poetic language, and it's a lot deeper than what you can get in the English. But the idea is there's three things that both men and women bring to each other in a relationship through this word garment, and that is comfort, security, and protection. No, what was three? No, comfort, beauty, and protection. Anyway, long introduction. Just what are your feelings about traditional roles and maintaining relationships?
So what I maintain effectively is that men and women working together in complementary roles is not necessarily traditional. This is a universal human maxim, and I think the reason why we say this is traditional now is because over the last 10 to 15 years or so, people are now saying that there's multiple genders, that there's more than two genders, that gender is a social construct. But actually, and I obviously don't have the stats on this in my head, but if you just look at the general scope of human society, most people don't agree with this, and we know this because most people are still, nobody really believes that there's 2,000 genders. Most people believe that in a relationship, a man should be a man, a woman should be a woman, and you're absolutely right. This isn't necessarily Islamic per se. This is really a universal human maxim. It's something which translates across cultures. So personally, I wouldn't really use the term traditional values because it's true that does usually have religious connotations, and as someone who is not religious, I don't really consider myself traditional. I consider myself...
Should we call it so we can label it so people know what to go back to? You need to identify stuff and say, that is the way. Do you know what I mean? You need to say this is a thing. So what do you want to call it? And should we really be against labeling it as something that that's religious, when it's only the religious people who are really holding fast to it, because it's the atheists who are mainly losing ground on this and conceding to it. It's the woke left that's mainly atheist. There's no religious people who are in the woke left. It's anti-religious, basically. So isn't it just to give the religious people their due and say, you guys got it right and you're the only ones who are really hanging on it, and that's statistically true?
Well, no, because, for example, many atheists such as Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and the fellow Carl Benjamin of the Lotus Eaters, none of these men are religious, yet none of them are for the woke left. And I think the problem is that, being an atheist or being non-religious doesn't mean you have to be on the woke left. Many conservatives or people who lean more libertarian are very much against a lot of the leftist wokeism. And I do understand what you're saying about, it being traditionalism, but the problem as well is that when we start to say traditional versus this, we're actually splitting people up into dichotomies, which is what I say is more of a universal human maxim, as in I don't really come from any religious standpoint, nor do I come from any political standpoint. My standpoint is really what I'm trying to propose is a universal human maxim that actually in a relationship men should be men, women should be women. And because this does vary from culture to culture, how the culture interprets this and how the culture interprets this, but if we start with that as a base, because again, evolutionary biology, there's nothing religious about that. From a biological standpoint, a man is most likely to be the protector and the provider, a woman's most likely to be the carer and the nurturer. This is biology. This has nothing to do with religion. So I really fail to see how the need to bring religion into this. Again, of course, we are speaking from a different standpoint. But what you find fascinating as well is how, while you are religious and while myself are not religious, we can both agree that feminism is trash. That's a lot of the leftist.
And I want to say I agree that we shouldn't be splitting people up unnecessarily. Like I said in the beginning, I want to invite people to these, essentially, they are universal in the sense that they make sense, and people automatically defaulted in realizing, oh yeah, a man is definitely a man and a woman is definitely a woman. You can't suddenly choose to be the other thing, right? Or you can't just choose to become a cat, which is what people are deciding realistically, yeah? And then there'll be a helicopter, and it'll be, and it's moving towards being a child, by the way. That's where we're moving towards. Pedophilia is a very big thing nowadays. So I do like the idea of not, and I didn't really want to make it about, this is, Islamic or traditional necessarily. What I actually wanted to focus on was letting people realize the benefit of being different. Because, and this is what this verse of the Holy Quran was basically pointing at. It said, they're a garment for you and you are a garment for them. You have something to bring and they have something to bring in terms of men and women. And what we've lost because of feminism as it's decided now, because I like to say I'm a feminist, but not the feminist that you're against. I'm a feminist in the sense that
women's advocates.
I'm a women's advocate,
yes,
for
women's
sure.
Advocates,
yeah,
yes.
because I'm a women's advocate in the sense that I say women are different, therefore should be treated differently. They shouldn't have to do the stuff they don't want to do. Right? Statistically, they want to do certain things, men want to do certain things. Let people do what they want to do. Don't force people to do, go to work if they don't want to go to work, if they want to be housewives, right? And you should a lot of women do want to be housewives because actually they like their children, okay? And they actually don't want strangers taking care of their children.
And that is biology.
Right, exactly, right? Okay, so anyway, I want to talk about these three things, the comfort, the beauty, and the protection brought by being in a relationship between men and women. And here where you've got to say it, right? So the comfort is, well, at a very basic level, in Arabic, what's your background again? I remember you're Indian or something, but I keep feeling like everybody thinks you're like Ethiopian or Somalian, but you're what?
Half Indian and half Tanzanian. Yeah, most people do think I'm Eritrean or Ethiopian, but yeah, half Indian, half Tanzanian, and my background is non-religious, very secular.
Sure. The reason why I was asking, because just in case you knew some Arabic, but then I guess you don't since you're not from that. So the word in Arabic for men and women or spouses is zawaj, which is a really beautiful word. I don't know if you know what it means, but it means part of a pair, which you kind of have in English as well. Your better half, your other half, and all this kind of stuff, right? but it means not just an identical pair, but a complementary pair, like a pair of shoes can be called zawaj, right? Because they're different, but they're supposed to work together, hopefully. Like, hopefully when you're walking, you're not like one foot is trying to go the other way and the other foot, and that's really important, because in modern feminism, instead of the genders complementing each other, they're competing against each other. It's like 2 feet competing against each other, you're going nowhere. What do you feel about that to begin with? And that's sort of that's just to bring it back to the comfort idea. You feel more at peace because you're supposed to be one, right? And you do things that are different, and you do things better because you're one when you're together. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely, and I was actually thinking earlier as how maybe one of the reasons why a lot of people are romanticizing the past and romanticizing traditionalism is because things have swung so much to the extreme today that people think that, oh my god, we need to go back to the past. It's not, because obviously there are a lot of good things about the past. I was talking about a gentleman with this earlier, but I do wonder if this dichotomy of traditionalism versus, we'll say, the leftist wokeism is because the woke stuff is so extreme. You know, you have these kids who are just, some of the things they say are crazy. I mean, they, you know, like as we were saying, now saying people can identify as a cat, and it's just ridiculous. And what's even worse is that they have such a loud voice. They're so prominent in the media, in politics. So I do wonder if that's why people are romanticizing traditionalism. But definitely that's something I've always maintained. You know, a man and a woman are supposed to be complementary. We're not supposed to be competitors. You know, men are really, I mean, historically, men usually compete with other men and women usually compete with other women. But this idea of women and men competing with each other is really very strange. And it is something which feminism has caused. It's definitely calls for women and men to be competitors rather than to be effectively complementary.
Yeah, I mean, this whole, when you hear feminists say we don't need men,
It's terrible.
and that's just a sad thing to say, because I think they've just been hurt. That's all it is. That's what I boil it down to. So, and also, yeah, the whole thing about the woke thing, and I like your ideology, idea that wokeism is basically against biology. It's against what we see with our eyes. What we know, men and women are completely different, but it's against what we see with our eyes. Like, we know our mothers are different to our fathers. We know they look different. We know they act different.
Can you repeat what you said about?
Oh, wokeism. Yeah, maybe we should explain the term. It's this idea. It's kind of. I would describe it, and then when you start making terms, you have to explain.
What did you say about wokeism?
Okay, do you understand the term wokeism?
No, what did you say?
Okay, I would say wokeism. Okay, what is wokeism to begin with? Wokeism, the idea of being woke is like you got woken, you suddenly realize reality.
That's not what you said earlier, though. But
No, I'm just trying to define it, but
It
yeah.
actually comes from cultural Marxism, because a lot of these ideas, you know, it's important to remember that feminism, gender as a social constructionism, deconstructionism, these all derive from cultural Marxism, and a lot of them come from the Frankfurt School, which was created, as well as the Birmingham School. These schools are created to push these ideas, and really their whole goal was to effectively reconstruct society and have this idea of gender as a social construct. And you're absolutely right, you know, a lot of it does link to paedophilia. If you look at people like Dr. John Money and also Alfred Kinsey, so there's a lot of very dark stuff underneath all of it, but that's really where it comes from, cultural Marxism or critical theory.
And so you can only have that idea if you don't think. Well, I think it's strongly. You can't be a proper Marxist in the proper sense without being an atheist, I would say, because you have to let go of all the biological realities. You have to say, no, it's all in our minds, and we can reconstruct everything.
You're not. You're.
Go on.
The
What's
fact,
your question?
don't push it so
Oh,
close.
sorry.
To mine.
Don't get upset. This is how I catch sound. Otherwise, you're going to catch the wind.
I'd be upset if I want to, but
Okay, but I want to keep a conversation with her because I want to make it. I'll ask him one question, but I want to. Because we're going quite well with a good conversation.
that is Islamic cannot be woke because they're already woke.
No, I don't think so. I'm talking about statistics. Okay, I'm just going to talk to it because statistically, we're talking about reality here. Reality, Muslims are not woke generally. They're just the opposite on the end of the spectrum. So we can maybe there's one person who's this and whatever, but they're probably.
Say you're woke.
Sorry, am I woke? No, I'm not woke. Okay, so I just want to I want to make progress so people have some benefit from these videos rather than just getting lost in, you know, like description of titles and things like that. Anyway, So,
It's not new made up.
there's another thing that the Quran says, which is really beautiful, that is overlooked. Okay, and it has this weird distinction. Okay, and I'll say I'll put all the references in the bottom of the video, but chapter 30, verse 21, it distinguishes between love and mercy that you have between women and men. So it's kind of like there's a biological need, like sex and things like that, right?
No, I don't think.
And this is coming back to the comfort idea. Like, there are basic needs you have. Like, if you don't get to eat ever, you're going to be in big trouble. You're going to be hungry, and then you're going to need it more, right? And statistically, people who are in long-term relationships have 95% of the sex, right? So it shouldn't be surprised, right? Because you've got it on tap, as it were, right? So people who are not in long-term relationships, they're struggling physically for their basic needs, but also there's a sense of gentility between husband and wife if you found a decent person to begin with. Like if you're marrying somebody who doesn't care about the idea of marriage and they're individualistic and selfish, then you're going to have problems. You're not going to have any of these benefits, right? Okay, and people who think there's a competition between men and women and that men and women should do exactly the same things, then you're going to have problems, because it's like 2 feet trying to walk at the same time. Do you know what I mean? Trying to do the same thing rather than in tandem. You know what I mean? So, so there's those kind of benefits, some basic fundamental needs. Besides sex, there's a sort of warmth and understanding. I can't provide statistics for everything, but I think there's generally, like, I find as a man, between me and my wife, right, I often don't even realise if I'm hurting myself or push myself too much. My wife goes, calm down, you're feeling sick, you need to do this. And then it's the other way around as well, like we're protecting the wives. Like she always tells me to throw out the rubbish, because actually, statistically, women have a higher, nausea, I can't remember the word, disgust. There's a word for it, but they have a higher sensitivity to disgust, which is actually biologically beneficial if you want to take care of children, you want to avoid germs, you don't want the children to die and be sick and all these kind of details. So what do you think about the kind of semi-physical and, I don't want to call it spiritual, what's it like, emotional benefits that provide, we're still on number one, which is comfort, right? Provide comfort to both beings, both ways. How do you feel about that?
Well, I completely agree with you, that a relationship between a man and a woman is supposed to provide comfort and warmth. And personally, I think, happy, stable, fulfilling relationships between males and females are one of the most beautiful things in the world. I'm an author, I write romance books, among other genres. And, there is something very beautiful about a romantic relationship between a man and a woman that can be maintained, that can stand the test of time. And, this is something which, yes, a lot of the feminism is effectively destroying, because it's teaching women that they should view men as oppressors, and it is very much distorting this, and it just seems to be very hard on everyone. Going back to what you said earlier about a lot of the wokest leftists being atheist, again, I want to maintain that it doesn't really have much to do with atheism, because a lot of atheists or non-religious folk do oppose this. A lot of them are conservative or libertarian or liberal or apolitical, and they do not support this stuff either. So let's not try and make it seem like atheists are all endorsing this, especially considering...
Isn't a Marxist thing essentially atheist? You can't be really a Marxist if you're religious, because they're antipathetic. What's the word? They're opposites.
Well, yeah, but then you could very...
Because I was saying to someone...
Shall I can bring that closer, stand on the foot.
Khaled, do you want me to hold it?
Yeah, it's off right now.
Yeah, is it off? No, it's off.
Yeah,
it's off. It's off.
just-
Okay, do you want to hold it for her on the side, so it doesn't fall?
Yeah. I mean, effectively, well, you could very easily then say that, is an ISIS Islamic. I mean, there's extremism in everywhere, isn't there? You could say ISIS is Islamic and the Crusades were committed by Christians, there's extremists everywhere. But we wouldn't turn around and say that all Muslims are terrorists, nor would we say that all atheists are Marxists. So let's maintain the reality on that.
Sure, we'll leave that for now, right? Okay, and since you brought up the beauty thing, and it's so important, right? This is the next... Okay, so the beauty element. How does I hear? There's one person over here, Simon over there, is talking, and he keeps bringing up the sort of the beauty of Muslim women. And there's different kinds of beauty, right? There's the overt, like, wearing no clothes. I'm not saying you have. Talking about the extremes. You don't have to be Western and naked, but there are subtle kinds of beauty is what I want to point at, right? Okay, and and this is not just about Muslim women, this is about any married person. When you stay married, you have to be patient, you have to be understanding, you have to be soft, you have to be understanding, really. And there's beauty in that growth that is necessary for a society to exist. Okay, and nowadays you see all of, as singlehood is increasing as well, people they just get upset about every single thing. You disagree with a little thing, you're the worst person in the world, I don't want to talk to you. This is a very woke thing, by the way. Like, you probably noticed that when the woke brigade come here, they come with umbrellas and they come with megaphones with the sole idea of not talking,
Just making noise.
just making noise. But they also say, I asked them, why don't you want to talk? And said, because we're right. That's not. What's the point of coming to Speaker's Corner, deciding you're right, and shouting down the other women who want to talk, right? So there's not beauty in that. I think that's a really ugly thing. You can't talk to people, you can't communicate, you can't share ideas, you can't be at one with other people. And being together between man and woman is the first bit of training, the first tiny circle of society, because after that you grow families, after that you can have a neighbor. But if you can't do one-to-one, you're in trouble. How do you feel about that kind of beauty, that growth that comes from being together between man and wife?
Well, I definitely agree as well, because, you know, happily married people, there's been evidence to suggest that people in good, we'll say specifically in good marriages, because obviously not all marriages are good, but people in good marriages do tend to be much happier than people who are single, because there is that sense of a couple bringing out the best in each other. And, you know, if you're able to grow together and have that positive level of growth, that is a very good thing for society. So I do agree with you that, yes, there's definitely a lot of beauty in marriage, there's a lot of beauty in, because at the end of the day, you know, when a man and woman are together and they love each other, or, you know, I'm not against homosexuality, you know, same with a homosexual couple, the man and the man, woman and woman, when two people are together and they're in love and they're able to grow together and they're able to carry that to make a family, that is a very beautiful thing. And this is really probably one of the main reasons why I'm against feminism, because I'm very pro-romance, I'm very pro-love, and very pro-compassion. I think that's really, well, it is just a universal thing again, because this is something which most people desire. Most people desire a caring, stable relationship. That's just something which most people want.
Yeah. So just to bring back what we're talking about here, I'm trying to bring back the people's want and need to be in relationships, in long-term relationships, because a lot of people are saying, no, we don't want to bother anymore, there's no need anymore, you know, and that's a really sad thing. So just for people to know, I'm talking about these three qualities that the Quran essentially points out, which is comfort, beauty, and protection, right? And then you also brought out the secondary thing that comes out of the beauty of a one-to-one relationship, which is a family, which is a beautiful thing. Children are beautiful things, right? Without that children, we become like robots and we forget how to be real and things like that. There's so many things that children bring to the world. So I suppose that's a secondary thing, and maybe people could express it better than I could. Yeah, you want to say something?
People like listen to the news a lot, and a lot of people haven't realized that the news is complete BS. So it makes it very hard to stay in a relationship, because one person gets manipulated. You think that's completely normal. 1 year, 2 years, you're in the relationship.
You want to jump into
No, I don't.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then suddenly things change, you know, and the news convinces one of the people in the relationship that the other person is a complete arsehole, and the person listens.
Right.
And the unity isn't in the family unit.
Should I put you on the spot? You're a single man, but have you accepted the BS?
Have I accepted? Of course not. Does it look like I've accepted the BS?
Okay, what do you think? Because you're one of the target audiences, actually single, right? Okay, I'm putting you on the spot, but it's good. This is how we're trying to keep it real, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The whole point of this is not just empty talk and making a video for the sake of it. It's to really try to convince the importance of it.
Who is the alliance to? Is it to the family or is it to the state? The problem is
No, it's to God.
No, I know, but a lot of people,
Actually, that's a really-
lot of people
Yeah.
think that the state is a better partner or a person to take advice than the person, their family, whether it's their parents or their loved one. They give their decision power over to Twitter or to the news or to politicians. Because people idolize.
I wanna
And they
try to-
idolize, and
I wanna
they-
step back
or
from-
actors. They listen to people.
I want to step
outside the
back
family
from
unit.
taking, like, okay, I kind of want to step away from the idea of it's somebody's fault or it's the state's fault or whatever, right? I want to take responsibility, and I want people to take responsibility and say, you know what, we chose to be single to some extent, right? I do think there are a lot of reasons why people are single, and because there's no community, and there used to be community that used to bind
I'm
people
explaining
together.
Why there's a problem in the relationship, in the long-term relationship. There's a problem.
Yes.
Because the alliance has been broken. Before the 1960s, the family was the most important thing. People used to listen to each other hardcore.
Yeah.
And then after the sexual revolution, slowly, after decades, the state took more and more power from this unity that used to be so strong. And that was the idea, the objective, to break the family units so that people could be divided and
I think
conquered.
we ourselves broke.
It was all planned.
No, I did a whole video about how people are easily tricked, and this is my thing against atheism. Atheists are easily tricked because they have no foundations. So yes, it was planned, but the only people who didn't follow like sheep with the plan were the traditional, not traditional religious people. But anyway,
To break up the family.
it seems to be something.
How does the state benefit from like?
I don't know about the state. It's not the state necessarily. It's some psychopathic people at the top who hate humanity. That's,
People isolated so they can't unite and talk.
anyway. So yeah, sure. There's all sorts of reasons why people might say.
Weak. That's the idea.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up. Because, sorry, I got this. You know what? I'm gonna just stick talking to you, right?
Yeah, no, this is great though. I love your stuff. I love your approach, so calm and mature and not making fun of people.
Okay, yeah, I hope so. But I might be a bit. I might point to the people where I think the source of the problems are, but I don't have to push it too much. Like I do think I'm not a atheist hater.
I mean, I'm not atheist myself, but I know a lot of people are, because also I know a lot of atheists don't support the woke stuff. That's why I don't think it's fair to lump them into, for example, the Carl Benjamin of the Lotus Eaters. He's very, very conservative, libertarian, and he absolutely, his whole channel, he completely just talks about all the problems. I mean, even there's a lot of
yeah, I
YouTubers,
can
a lot of
also
them on the
Douglas
internet.
Murphy as well.
Murray, yeah.
Douglas Murray, was it?
Yeah, Douglas Murray. He's a gay athist dude,
Yeah,
and he doesn't approve
sure.
of this stuff.
So I think they're a small group, but relatively, I'm talking about in terms of percentages and who are following, who are the groups that are following it mostly. It's not the religious, and it's actually anyway. But okay, so I want to. There's the beauty of growing as a human being when you commit to a relationship, you work in. I love how Jordan Peterson talks about this. He says, it's the pressure of sticking together. If you are ready to walk out of a relationship, you can never learn anything. Right? And then there's the offshoot of more beauty, which is the family, and then I would say society comes out of that. That's why we have broken societies at the moment, because we have broken relationships, which lead to broken families. It just keeps going all the way through. Okay? So that's a little bit about beauty, right? And then protection. So I want to talk about a few levels of protection. One is, and again, it's both ways. And first of all, is sort of sexual immorality, right? So as I said before, people who are in long-term relationships have all the sex, 95% of the sex, right, in society.
I mean, there are people in sexist marriages as well, of course.
Yes, that's true as well. But I'm talking about still, it's important to put those percentages together, but still realise that despite that, they have 90% of the sex, right? 95% of the sex, sorry, right? Is it ruining your channel? Saying the word sex. Okay, so intercourse. I want to make it go on his channel as well, right? So, okay, so that's intercourse, sexual morality. I don't know. You can't say intercourse morality. I'm not sure if there's a word. Okay. So
Use the word that you want.
Okay, yeah, and so let's like to support that statistic, a lot of people now know that like 18 to 30-year-olds, despite being at their like highest peak in terms of sexual interest and libido, they're not having sex. 50% of them have not had sex for the last year. So this is a very common and big problem, and it's going to lead to a
I
lot
imagine most of them are men as well. I imagine it's largely males because it's obviously harder for young men to have sex, and because as well there's a large availability of sex now with apps like Tinder and that, but it's usually only a minority of women are actually having sex with. So that's just something to point out as well.
Exactly, 4% of men have all the sex on Tinder, basically. Most of the time, and the reason why it's mainly men who are having less sex, I guess, is because it's women. Most of the women are having sex with that 4%. So they're getting sex, but like not much anyway. And then the men are completely taken out. So yeah, and so that's gonna. So if you're not having sex with a real person, you're going to be going towards pornography and prostitution. And this is, I'll point out very briefly, there's a massive rise in paedophilia, and that's a result, I would say partly a result of what happens with pornography, because it makes you go to more and more extreme things, because that's how the human mind is made. It wants new things.
Verena. Oh, that's Verena.
Okay.
Sorry
So
again, Callie, we wrap this up in a second.
yeah, so what do you think about this sort of protection from immorality in both ways?
It's complicated, isn't it? Because obviously, I don't think that. Pornography addiction is a big problem, especially with young men. There's a lot of young men on the internet who are speaking about this, who are trying to talk about things like positive masculinity and how men should be more empowered and not be relying on things like pornography. And, the NoFap community, that's a very big thing as well. So I think a lot of men are speaking out against this. And there's a really good guy named Cole Hastings, who I quite like. He's got quite a big guy on YouTube, and he talks a lot about this, about positive masculinity, and Jordan Peterson's talking about this as well. As for the correlation between pornography and pedophilia, I'm not sure. It does seem most of the pedophiles are the rather high-profile people.
No, but there's a massive rise in paedophilia, and where is that massive rise coming? And that
It's mainly coming from the elites, isn't it? And
no, because there are hundreds of thousands of kids being trafficked for paedophilia. The elites they don't want to have sex with hundreds of thousands of people. They can't physically. Okay, and it's known that if you're a porn addict, what naturally happens, inevitably happens, is that you go to more and more extreme versions of pornography. Were you aware of that?
Doesn't it's... I don't know if I should bring this up or not. The fellow was bringing it up, but effectively, doesn't Muhammad consummate a relationship with a 9-year-old girl?
Okay.
There have been some more, say, fundamentalist Muslims who have endorsed things like grown men having relationships with children and child marriages and such and such. I know this does happen effectively, especially in countries where there is very, very large...
So let me talk about it, because he mentioned it and I thought I was going to ignore it, but basically Islam says you have to be married to a woman. Okay, now the question of how old that woman is and if you believe in listening to nature or not is up to you. So for example, and I don't necessarily believe he did marry a 9-year-old, but if that 9-year-old was a woman, and this might sound controversial to our mindset and nowadays, but even 7-year-olds of the past, kings and queens were married at that age, right? It's just a current mindset. But let me just explain. Let's say the law was, and I'll go into this, it's a bit of a sidetrack, but I don't want to spend too much time. Let's say the law decided you have to be 30 years old to have sex, right? They decided, right? But actually, you have sexual urges, you have basic needs, right? Is the law correct, therefore?
Well, in that context, I'd say no, it isn't.
Right. So basically, if we're trying to make it really simple, let nature decide. And nature says when you're biologically ready to have sex, you should be allowed to have sex. That's what I'm saying. So Islam says if you're a woman and you're a man, you're allowed to have sex. It does not say you should be a child. That's against Islam.
Sure, as long provided as they're in a similar age range.
No, but that's your mindset. That's a Western way of thinking. But the simple idea is that's a man. There's a man and a woman, and they chose. And you don't. Nobody gets to dictate to them who they like and who they're allowed to marry.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, so I want to get to the next level of protection, which is protection from capitalism. I think a lot of women are abused at work because they're more agreeable. Okay, and so they do a lot of the crappy jobs for low pay. There's a reason for the gender pay gap, because they get paid less they choose jobs that pay less. Okay, and they get more abused because they're more agreeable. On the other hand, you've got men who are naturally industrious. What do I mean by that? Statistically, they're more attracted to STEM fields, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These produce more money, right? So just like in any company, like if let's say there's a hospital, I'm not going to be the doctor and the chef, right? We specialize, and when you specialize, you actually get more benefit. So and it's kind of like did I miss something? I did miss something earlier on. I'll come. When you have both men and women trying to go to work, this is a massive problem in the relationships, right? Is that women are just too tired. Men will have sex any time of the day, right? Okay, but if you've got a woman, you'd be like, I'm really tired, I can't have sex. And this is a massive problem in what we were talking about, sexless marriages, right? So why don't people specialize? Men are just generally industrious, and just psychologically it's known men like things, women like people, and that's not a bad thing to like people. It's just harder to convert into money, right? So let people specialize, let men work, let women do what they're amazing at and men are relatively rubbish at, which is taking care of children. My wife still makes fun of me. Like after years, there was one of our kids, right, and I forgot to put the nappy on or put the pants on or something like that, and she still reminds me, like she would never make that mistake, right? I'm not purposely trying to make mistakes, right, as a father, right? My point is, we're good at different things, okay, and I suppose my quick point here is men protect women from abuse at the workplace, okay, and in turn, in a subtle way, and I don't know if people appreciate this, women give peace to men, so they don't spend their money on drugs and prostitutes and all these terrible things, and use their money constructively instead of. In fact, I think women are really good at taking care of property and things like this. There's a beautiful. There's a beautiful work together, teamwork there that protects each other from abuse in different ways. And in this particular way, capitalism. How do you feel that maybe relationships can protect men and women from capitalism in different ways?
Just a couple final comments before we finish. Yes, I do think that it's very easy to blame capitalism. I wouldn't necessarily say this is because of capitalism per se. It's more because of the large rise in wealth inequality. However, this isn't necessarily all purely because of capitalism. It's because of the way capitalism is being used, and there's definitely been a rise in a push for more women to enter the workforce and to negate being housewives and mothers. And what's quite sad is that prior to the 1960s, lots of women did indeed work. It's just that feminism almost pushed that onto all women instead of accepting that most women rather be housewives and most women rather be with their children than in the workplace. So I do think that there is a lot of wealth inequality caused by capitalism, but I wouldn't necessarily say capitalism is all problematic. It's more about the way capitalism is used. Thank you, Khaled.
Yeah. So I will just finish because we made it quite long. But yeah, I don't blame capitalism for everything. But I think capitalism easily becomes abusive when you have immoral agents, as it were. Like you can have good capitalism with moral people. Like money itself is not evil, but it can be used for evil as well. It's like nuclear power. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, right? But it depends about how good the people are who are operating it. And I suppose just to wind up, there's something I like. It's about protecting our future. Like there's so many people committing suicide because they have no sense of looking forward to a beautiful future. And when you have family, that's definitely something to look forward to when you have children. But there's another kind of element I'm going to just touch into and then I'll leave it, right? There's a really weird domino effect of women going to work and not cooking food, and that is the rise of frozen food and industrialized food. Okay, in the 1950s, when women started working, they stopped cooking, and that caused unhealthy food full of preservatives and chemicals and whatever, and it started off a domino effect of frozen and unnatural food. And so it protects you. Just
your
keep it
culture,
short.
In your culture.
In Western culture,
That's not Western culture.
you're just making up information that's no sense of reality. I think you're awoke. Okay, so that's typical woke. Like say things based nothing on reality. Okay, so it's not my culture. It's the opposite of my culture. My
bored,
culture,
bro.
my religion.
Until she's bored.
Yeah. Anyway,
Hey, Mike.
I should ignore the hecklers. I'm not used to
I'm not
anymore.
heckling.
Anyway, so hecklers are when you provide
Fine,
nothing
I just need
useful.
to start engaging.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
But I
So
do
anyway,
appreciate
what do you think about that? What do you think about this kind of protecting your future with healthy food and protecting the environment and all this kind of stuff?
I mean, yeah, obviously, I completely agree that there's a lot of
And
problems regarding food. The problem is that's a much larger
No, I mean
conversation.
that kind of necessarily happens in a traditional relationship when somebody's actually got time to make food and the home, the woman. How do you feel about
I mean,
that?
the refrigerator was invented around the 1950s. There were a lot of kitchen appliances that were invented in the 1950s, which did make housewives' lives a lot easier, and we should be very grateful for these things. I mean, again, these appliances were invented to help make lives easier for males and females. So yeah, I do agree that these.
But what I mean to say is nowadays hardly anybody cooks in the Western world. I'm not going to push this, but just to put things in context, it's only traditional families is where they've got the mother at home who's got the energy left to cook. It's not like just having the ability, the conveniences, the tools. You need the time and the energy.
Andy.
Sure, I need to start.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.